The EU stood its ground on Greenland.
Yep.
Wow. Is
Mhm.
that a win for EU and loss for Trump? What does it actually change?
Well, it's definitely a loss for Trump because the very day of his speech, in his speech at Davos, he said that he will only be satisfied if he owns Greenland, not a lease, not a temporary agreement. He wants to own Greenland, and he was quite clearly rebuffed by all the G7 leaders, by the heads of the countries in Europe that talked to him, and frankly, I think was another occasion for Ukraine to rescue President Trump. President Trump said at the end of the day that he'll be meeting with Zelensky. Zelensky came in. There was a whole positive press from President Zelensky. President Zelensky supported President Trump in a lot of the things in his speech. And in the end, I think once again, just like in Istanbul in 2025, when Russia didn't want to do anything, President Zelensky was there, ready. After Alaska, he brought in all the European leaders. They changed the NATO funding for weapons to Ukraine. All these things that President Trump couldn't figure out how to do positively, Ukraine came to the rescue time and time again. Unfortunately, the United States seems to be putting pressure on Ukraine at the moment, not recognizing that Ukraine is going to be the best friend that the United States is going to have for a very long time. And this is the strategy that President Trump has employed, to go back to your original question about Greenland, being tougher against your friends and kinder to your enemies. And in the long run, we don't see that as being successful for any country in any history. So if President Trump thinks he can change the rules of history all around to revolve around him, that's one thing. But in the end, it will always come back to hurt him. And that means hurting the country and hurting our allies in the end. We don't know where it's going to go forward. But right now, we're in another situation where Ukraine thought that they had worked as kindly as possible, openly with the United States. We will do what you ask. And yet the United States is still putting pressure on Ukraine to change its territories in a way that's against the Ukraine's constitution. And here's another moment where Europe may be involved again and saying, you cannot change sovereignty. You couldn't change it in Greenland. Let's not change it in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. I mean, does this growing list of Trump's setbacks make him weaker at this moment?
Well, he is definitely hurting the chances that his party will maintain control of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and that will almost certainly change his politics in 2027 and 2028. Right now, not only does he get to dictate what laws they vote on, but what laws they don't vote on. He has stopped the Senate and the House from voting on laws about his actions in Venezuela. The Epstein files, he's done numerous things to stop it. Only one petition went forward to overturn him. So it's his ability to stop Congress from doing investigations, from doing anything that he doesn't want. He will lose that if there is a change in the House and Senate. And how does that happen? That can happen with elections, sure. But right now it's happening with retirements and people not running for office. Last year was a historic year, 2025. In the year after a presidential election, that we had over 43 members of Congress and Senate said that they will not be running in 2026. Just today, a long-term chairman of a financial committee in Congress, Vern Buchanan from Florida, announced that he will not be running. More people have announced in January that they will not be running for Congress. And these are Republican senators and congressmen, because they don't see a possibility for them to win. And for them, why would they raise money and lose it in the campaign? Instead, they can keep being successful this year, retire, and then become a rich lobbyist down the road. So every day we are hearing more announcements from people from the Republican side that they do not see a victory in sight. And that means bad news for Trump down the road, because he will then have to deal with the Democrats being in control of either both houses or one. But in any case, it's going to be bad for President Trump.
By the way, the EU has signed a deal with India. Is that another blow?
Well, especially coming after the Mercosur agreement, there's something about that being held up. The historic deal, free trade deal with South America and the EU that was announced last week. Now coming to India, an even bigger population and an even bigger market. Europe is continuing to do what the United States has done for 60 years, which is expand free trade. It's only during this presidency who looks back at the 19th century as a way of doing economics. Europe is doing the same thing that led the United States to be the richest, most powerful country in the world. And it's EU who's now taking that up and constantly expanding its markets, constantly opening up its doors to more market capitalism. In the end, I think it only bodes good news for Europe and in essence for Ukraine as well, because we know that we are going to be pushing very hard for EU accession before 2030 for Ukraine. If that's the case, then it's Ukraine and the EU on the upswing and the American economy that's going to be suffering.
But here's what really worries me, the ties between Russia and the EU. Could India end up becoming a black or gray buffer in this whole equation?
Well, we know there are a couple of buffers, aren't there? There's,
Yes.
we know there are certainly countries next to Ukraine that are still buying Russian oil. We know that a country like Turkey has increased its import of Russian diesel to sell to other countries through its refineries on the southern coast. So there are plenty of gray areas within the EU where we still have this, but it's also something that the EU is going to have to work on, not just the open trade with other countries. It's a good thing overall to expand trade. It is, but it should not be a one-for-one where the EU accepts free trade with India and therefore expands its use of Russian oil. They can do two things at the same time. They can both increase trade with India and increase any kind of sanctions for the use of Russian oil. Those aren't exclusive thoughts to have, and it's something that they need to work on. Not just waiting until 2027 for Europe to be off of Russian fossil fuels, but even working to the end of 2026 to end that. And that can be done with the amount of partners there are in the world.
So another killing involving ICE agents. What's going on?
Well, it's not a pretty situation in the United States. And as of the last 24, 48 hours in the United States, the political rhetoric has really shifted against the president. It was one thing when a mother of 3 children was shot point blank in the head less than 2 weeks ago. Many people were making excuses that she was in a car, the car shouldn't have been where it was, and that she acted irrationally by driving when the officer said to stop. In the end, though, she was shot from the side, not from any officer in front of her, and it was a cruel incident that will inevitably, even if there are no criminal charges, as there's a certain level immunity for these federal police, there will certainly be a civil case, meaning that the family members will sue the government to understand why those people were there, were they trained properly, and they will sue for some kind of financial damages. What happened over the weekend was another incident where a person came to an operation by the Immigration Customs Authority. However, these were Border Patrol agents. So these were not people there who do ICE enforcement in case somebody is there who has overstayed their visa, making sure that people are not here in violation of any statute. These were Border Patrol agents sent from Mexico, the border of Mexico, where they're normally deployed, all the way to Minnesota to do the same kind of operations that ICE is doing. Inevitably, that ended in being an American citizen, a nurse who tends to American veterans. He came to the site of one of these operations by Border Patrol, trying to arrest what they said was some kind of criminal here illegally in the country. And he saw that a woman was pushed to the ground, tried to protect that woman. The Border Patrol agents then started attacking him with their fists, pushing him down to the ground. In that scrum, they discovered that he had a gun on him. It's a lawful thing in the state of Minnesota. He's registered to have that gun. In fact, it is a very big point of pride for many Republicans that people have that right in this country to have weapons on them if they so choose. Even though the weapon he did not grab for it, he did not shoot at them, they disarmed the man and then they shot him in the back multiple times. This incident, probably more so even shockingly, more so than the attack on the mother of 3 children, has really changed the narrative in the United States. Now Republican senators are questioning what happened. Is there going to be a review? because American citizens are calling them and saying, we're not comfortable with this. We always have to remember that last election, whenever an election happens, you have to put that in the past. President Trump likes to say that he's representing 80 million Americans who voted for him, but that happened. That's not, they don't vote every day. And what the next election is this fall for every member of Congress and half of the Senate. And what President Trump did in November of 25 is or November 2024, he made a coalition of not just those voters who support him no matter what, but he convinced independent voters, those who sometimes vote Democrat, sometimes vote Republican, and almost all of them in public polling are against this strategy. And that is what scares members of Congress and Senate. And even today, we are hearing from senators who never say anything. Some of them who have been yelled at in the press by their fellow senators and congressmen saying, why aren't you saying anything about this person being shot? And today they're saying that this was not right. We need to have an investigation. And so President Trump is really in a politically bad situation right now, where if he still wants a possibility for his party to win, he needs to shift the narrative and change it away from what's happening in Minnesota, fix the situation in Minnesota, which is trying to do by sending another commander there. But it is a very bad political situation for the U.S. government. Let's also acknowledge the fact that a person was killed and many people are being detained illegally. So,
yeah, we talk about all this problem inside Republicans, but now I want to ask you about this situation. So, can we now say that Trump is facing more and more domestic problems because of his actions?
Well, one of the immediate problems is that the House of Representatives only had 14 working days in January to come up with a budget so that there would not be another shutdown. As everybody remembers, there was a long shutdown of over 40 days in October, November of last year. To stop that shutdown, Congress agreed to do a temporary budget until the end of January. That was not agreed to by the end of the year. So they did a temporary budget and they said, well, we'll deal with it after we come back from New Year's. They had only 14 days, but surprisingly, they did put a budget together in those 14 days. And the House of Representatives voted for all those different parts of it before they left. This week, the House of Representatives is on vacation. They have left it for the Senate to vote on this. And what the Senate has heard from both the Republicans and Democrats, they have heard from their constituents saying, we don't like what's happening. And that has frozen any possibility of this passing immediately. So we are at the precipice of another potential government shutdown because of what's happening on the ground in Minnesota and other parts of the United States where people are being shot, people are being detained. And this is So when you're asking about a political after effect, what can happen because of this? President Trump might be in a situation where we are once again in a shutdown because of the political after effects of what he did by ordering those people to go into Minnesota.
You mentioned this problem, and I add Epstein case, ICE agents, pressure on the Fed, tensions inside the Republicans Party. That's not even the full list of Trump's problem right now, is it?
Yeah. No. I mean, ongoing federal investigations are continuing. We have yet to hear many issues from the Supreme Court. Earlier this month, the Supreme Court declined to put out a ruling, but we are still waiting for a ruling that should happen at the beginning of February. Whether the tariffs that President Trump has done unilaterally, that means without any input from Congress. The Constitution very clearly says that Congress is the only body that enacts tariffs, and President Trump has declared some special emergency powers for himself. So this might completely change America's budget. They might have to refund all the tariffs they collected in 2025. So that is hanging over this presidency. We have a lot of international events that are happening this year that the presidency needs to get ready for. We don't know what the situation is going to be with all of these prosecutions of people without visas in this country, whether you want to call them illegal or undocumented. There are a whole bunch of tourists coming for the World Cup this year. There's a lot of tourists that are planned to come for the celebrations of America's 250th birthday, including the largest flotilla in New York Harbor in history, assembled to show support for America, if that happens now. So there are many questions about the effects of this, and not just the immigration, but all of these policies and how that's going to affect a lot of things going forward in America, not least of which, if any of these things, such as the Supreme Court decision on tariffs, numerous other emergency actions that president has taken that are also federal court issues. And I would add to that, by the end of this week, the head of the agency that runs this immigration customs enforcement has been ordered by a federal judge in Minnesota to come to his courthouse by Friday with an explanation about why he has been ignoring orders issued by that court. And if that happens, if he doesn't show up, he'll be held in contempt by the court. Secondly, if he doesn't offer enough explanation, he can also be held in contempt. There are many things that are piling on President Trump because he is acting so aggressively instead of dictating things on a longer scale.